Okay, let's assume you have a dog named Fido. Fido, being a dog, has limitations to what he's able to comprehend. These limitations are the result of Fido's lower level of perception, and he must be communicated with this in mind. You may talk to Fido about how you hate doing your taxes, or how rough your day at work at the accounting firm was, because talking to him, getting all that stress off your chest, makes you feel better about your situation. But Fido's level of perception does not encompass taxes or accounting. He lacks a frame of reference for those things. He can, however, sense your mood using contextual clues. He uses your level of intonation, the changes in your body language, your facial expressions, etc., to discern how you're feeling. From this, he can tell that you're sad or angry or anxious about something, and whimpers in condolence. In this example, Fido is compensating for his lack of communicatory perception by using his ability to covertly read nonverbal contextual cues that your body, in most cases subconsciously, is creating. Comparably, women do the same thing. While women do not perceive their world in the overt, informationally based way that men do, they've supplemented this lack of factual perspicacity with a covert, emotionally and non-verbally based acumen. In short, women judge their peers' intentions, SMV, personality, and character by watching for non-verbal, subtle cues one subconsciously gives off, as opposed to reading and reciting raw information in the manner men do. And so, in today's article, we will go in depth on how women listen.
Others hide from being real by filling the air with words. The more words they throw out, the less actual communication happens, and they are left with only an illusion of connection. This is the intimacy they so ardently seek, but with these coping skills, find so elusive. Neither sex is wrong in their communication. Both sexes need to learn how to understand each other.
Let's use an example to better explain the differences in male-female communication. You're sitting on a couch with a beautiful girl named Lynn. Earlier, she told you how she loves engineers and fast cars, and as luck would have it, you're both an engineer and you drive a Ferrari. So you begin to tell her all about your job working for some automotive plant, how much you make, what your job entails on a daily basis, how you came about getting the Ferrari, the technical aspects that go into it, how it goes fast, what else it does. And yet, after you finish speaking, you notice Lynn's mood has completely changed. She seems distant, unreceptive. It's almost hot and cold compared to how she was before. She's cold, short in her responses. She doesn't look in your direction. She almost seems to be bored around you. She inches towards the other end of the couch. She points her feet away from you. She closes her arms. She sighs often. You think, well, maybe she didn't understand what I meant. I mean, she did say she liked engineers and fast cars, right? So you begin again, and you go into even more detail. And yet again, she becomes cold. And then, without you consciously realizing it, the entire encounter falls apart. You turn your feet towards her. You start talking with your hands. You grin as you talk. You try desperately to make and hold eye contact. Your voice varies. You fill the silence with more words. Laugh when you're uncomfortable or things become awkward. You make sharp motions with your head and limbs. You begin fidgeting. Your eyes glow with happiness in being in her presence. You crack a joke and laugh after she laughs. When she's distant, you pull your limbs in closer to your body. You use too much touching, too much contact. Randomly, without reciprocation. You stutter. You mumble. You inch closer to her. You decide to change up. You use passive aggression as an attempt to seem harsh, yet cool, like in the movies. Your phone goes off and you stiffen up like a red-handed criminal. You punctuate or fill the silence with, or. You match her emotions. She's happy, you're happy. She's sad, you're sad. You ask a bunch of personal questions, yet question after question, and all about her. What's your favorite movie? Your favorite color? Your hobbies? You like to imply things without outright saying them. I want to fuck you. In your head becomes, maybe we should go back to my bedroom and talk some more. LOL. Out of your mouth. While she may or may not understand the technical jargon you've buried her in, that's not what she's been listening to for this entire time. Instead, she's been watching your body language, just as we discussed earlier. And from those, she's been creating a character bio for you and deciding whether or not you're among the unworthy, the beta, or simps as people call it now, the alphas, or the unattainable, something we'll talk about later. For the sake of simplicity, the sum of all these minute judgments fall down to one important conclusion she will eventually aim to reach: the level of your investment in her, in this conversation, in your end goal, etc., etc. i.e., what do you really want and what are you giving up to get it? And why is that so important to her? Well, your level of investment is a rather accurate representation of other women's collective perception of how valuable you are, which she will use as a basis to gauge her own perceptions of you. Now, for the sake of simplicity, we'll categorize these levels of investment into two groups: an underinvested man and an overinvested man. They are defined as such. The underinvested man shows disinterest in any one woman, as he has multiple women in tow. This, in turn, must mean that either A, multiple women desire him, or B, it must at least imply that enough women desire him that he is sexually content, and thus must be worth her time. His underinvested state implies a pre-selection from other women without the need to prove it to her. The overinvested man shows his interest in her in abundance, making it clear to her that his sexual encounters are few and far between. He uses sexual regalings in an attempt to convince her of his sexual prowess, although his body language and current level of investment prove counter. Surely, a man who gets as laid as he says he does wouldn't feel the need to constantly harp on about it in an attempt to sleep with her. As such, this man is clearly unsatisfied, and the woman wonders why. And in the light of the undesirability amongst other women, she too shies away. Allow me to explain this further with another example. If you saw two identical rings and I told you one was worth more, how would you discern their true worth? Let's say ring A and ring B sat behind a glass display in a shop downtown, and 100 customers stopped in, all looking for a ring. Let's also say that 78 customers looked at ring A and 22 customers looked at ring B. From there, although not necessarily true, you could predict that ring A is worth more. The pre-selection from the other customers leads you to conclude that the value of ring A is higher. Okay then, let's take this a bit further. Let's say rings are all the rage this season, and you constantly hear people talking about them. From those conversations, you discern that 80% of the time, people mention ring A, while ring B is only mentioned 5% of the time. Higher demand usually creates or stems from a high value to the user, and if 80% of the people around you speak highly of ring A, you could assume ring A is worth more. Although you haven't witnessed the pre-selection firsthand, the implication of pre-selection leads you to conclude ring A is valued higher. Both of these examples illustrate just how preselection works within this context. While the actual value of the rings was undiscernible, using the context provided by your peers, you could be able to discern which ring was worth more. And surely, people wouldn't clamor over something of low value, as collectively, people's varying ranges of values typically averages out. Demand increases value, which in turn increases demand. This is the basis of preselection, which leads to abundance mentality, which leads to underinvestment, which leads to increased demand. For sake of novelty, we'll call this theory the red spiral. The contentness derived from sexual abundance in turn fuels the sexual interest and intrigue of other women. But what of overinvestment? Following our previous example, let's say the company producing ring B notices ring B's lack of demand and decides to incorporate a discount sale in order to generate more sales. But this is a mistake. The value of ring B was already low, and by lowering its value more, consumers will believe something might be faulty or that ring B is a counterfeit of ring A. The market for ring B is now limited to those who can afford ring A, or those who begrudgingly accept ring B as the runner-up or the next best thing. The folly involved is this. Low demand will lead to lower value, which then leads to market skepticism, followed by lower demand. This is the basis of desperation, which would lead to overinvestment, followed by skepticism, which leads to a scarce mentality. This then leads to a lack of sexual interactions in our main example, which leads to a decreased demand overall. And down it goes. We'll consider this theory a blue spiral. The desperation from a lack of sexual interactions that prevents future interactions and further fuels sexual desperation on a man's perspective. But why then do women bother with gauging the investment in the matter over raw evidence when discerning a man's worth to them? For this, we'll use one last example. Let's say you've taken up online dating on Tinder in Saudi Arabia, and every woman you came across on Tinder wore a hijab, one of those sheets covering their entire body. You wouldn't know what you were dealing with, what she looked like, etc., until you actually got her to the bedroom. Hell, some of the girls could be guys. So, to compensate for the mystery of it all, you might meet them for coffee first to get a chance to check for curves underneath the sheet, or a casual slip revealing some details of what's underneath. You study her frame, a term we'll get to in another video. This is what women are doing in a non-verbal sense. By reading your body language, they are checking underneath your hijab or sheet for the curves they like, possibly catching a glimpse of who you really are underneath all that fabric. Things like attractiveness and physique are only half of the equation for women. You need a strong frame of mind as well, which isn't inherently apparent like physicality is for men. And the more she likes from what she sees underneath that sheet or hijab of yours, the more likely she is to pursue you and look for some type of connection or relationship.